So thanks everybody so much for coming tonight to our webinar. We're sponsored tonight by the Nature Conservancy in Vermont and by the Friends of Green River Reservoir. We have 6 panelists tonight, along with an introduction from Milford Cushman, who is the founder and vice president of Friends of Green River Reservoir. So I will go ahead and get started with Milford. I will unmute you there, sir, if I can, or maybe you need to unmute yourself. And you can go ahead and get started with a little bit of introduction on who the Friends of Green River Reservoir are.
Thank you, Tom. And thank you everyone who are joining us and to the panelists here tonight. The Friends of Green River Reservoir were founded basically in 1990. Bill Bartlett and I co-founded the group because of our concern for the reservoir being overloved and overused. Both Bill and I come from a background of wilderness paddling. I'm going to read the mission statement of the Friends as a way to help ground us tonight.
Hey,
the Friends,
just real quick, you've been asked to speak up a little bit louder if you could.
Okay.
Thank you.
The Friends of Green River Reservoir is a nonprofit membership group dedicated to educating and acting to protect the wilderness-like character and wildlife habitat of Green River Reservoir State Park while preserving its heritage and historical uses for future generations. Our mission started with the building of the dam in 1948. And which we created the reservoir. Along the way, Morrisville Water Light actually has been quite a steward. Jim Fox promoted the idea that there would be a chain put at the top of the access ramp, which has preserved the reservoir as being one of the only non-motorized lakes in the entire state. That has engendered the wild wilderness-like character that the Friends of Green River Reservoir have supported. In the early 90s, Susan Bartlett and Bill Bartlett, Connie Monica from Forest Parks and Recreation, Bob Klein from the Nature Conservancy, and Senator Patrick Leahy converged on an effort to encourage Morrisville Water and Light to sell the park or the land, the Green River Reservoir, to the state. That was consummated in 1999. And since then, the Friends of Green River Reservoir, we're now in our 24th year. We have 226 memberships representing 450 people. And our work has been to support the Department of Forest Parks and Recreation and through education, through facilities. Some of our proudest work has been the implementation of viewshed protection bylaws in the town of Hyde Park. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you so much, Milford. That was wonderful. And so I'm going to start off with our questions for the panelists tonight. I'm going to start with Heather Furman. She's the state director for the Nature Conservancy in Vermont. So Heather, my question for you is, the Nature Conservancy was instrumental in the conservation of Green River Reservoir and the creation of Green River Reservoir State Park. Can you tell us a little bit about why TNC was interested in this piece of land and how TNC continues to protect and steward Green River Reservoir today?
Sure. Thank you, Tom. And first of all, thank you for hosting this conversation and inviting the Nature Conservancy. For those of you who may not be familiar with the Nature Conservancy, we are a global conservation organization working around the world on issues around biodiversity loss and climate change. And we have local chapters in all 50 states and 72 countries. And here in Vermont, we've been working on conservation issues for over 60 years. During that time, we have protected almost 300,000 acres of land. Much of that land is now in public ownership. In fact, 25% of publicly owned land in Vermont, or many of our state parks, our wildlife management areas, our state forests, were originally protected by the Nature Conservancy. So places that you probably know and love, Campbell's Hump State Park, Quechee Gorge, Jamaica Falls, and of course Green River Reservoir, were all protected with the help of the Nature Conservancy, and something that we're really proud of. So you asked about why we conserve Green River, and I think Milford did a wonderful job of kind of providing that background and that history. A lot of people came together with a real passion for this place and wanted to protect it. It was put up for sale by Morrisville Water Light. And like most lakes in Vermont, it could have been easily developed. Vermont is not like Maine or the Adirondacks, where there are tons of undeveloped shoreline and opportunities to experience that kind of wild aesthetic. And we actually have very few undisturbed shorelines. So as Milford said, we partnered with Green River Reservoir. We helped to negotiate the sale of the state of Vermont. And through this collective conversation and this collective effort, we were able to build a conservation easement. So that's a legal protective tool that the Nature Conservancy still holds today. And we were able to build in very specific language that protected the area from future development. So that language includes the 500-foot forest buffer reserve surrounding the reservoir for protection of water quality. It requires a sustainable forest management plan. And the easement outlines specific regulations on camping and boating that help protect the ecology. And so today, of course, Green River, I've been there, you've been there. It's one of the most loved places in Vermont because it's so unique. It feels remote, it feels wild, it appeals to people who want to have that experience of being in a place that is actually really carefully managed to avoid overcrowding. And so the easement, it helps to maintain that ecological integrity 24 years later, after we worked to conserve it. It's a really important nesting site for loons and songbirds, and people always talk about the moose that they see out there. So it's just a really special place. So I think the last thing I'll say is it's really important to note that while the state of Vermont is the owner of the land, and the state of Vermont, through the terrific work of Secretary Moore and Commissioner Snyder, they have to make decisions that balance the ecological integrity and the public uses. And that's a tough position to be in. There's a lot of demand on our public lands. But TNC will forever hold the conservation easement that effectively provides the sidebars of what can happen at Green River Reservoir. So as times change, as administrations change, as politics change, 50 or 100 years from now, the public will always be able to experience Green River Reservoir as a wild and beautiful place. So thanks for the question, Tom.
Thank you so much, Heather. And next, I'd like to open it up to John Groveman. John is with VNRC. And John, can you talk a little bit about what's been happening at Green River Reservoir recently and what some of the current concerns are? In particular, I'd love for you to give us some background on the dam relicensing process and what VNRC has been doing to help protect the reservoir and promote a healthy streaming system.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. It's great to be here. Thank you for the opportunity. Thanks for putting this together. So just for people who don't know, VNRC's Vermont Natural Resources Council. We're a over 50-year-old environmental advocacy group based in Montpelier. And go check out our website, vnrc.org, if you want to learn more about us. We have a number of programs at VNRC, including a water program, and I'm the Policy and Water Program Director. And part of the Water Program Director's work has always been and is currently to work on stream flow issues and river flow issues, including the impacts of hydroelectric facilities. So I'm going to just really briefly kind of give the thumbnail sketch of the licensing and water quality permitting certificate review for this facility, kind of how we got to where we are. And I'm going to keep it pretty simple. And so if people have questions, we could get deeper into it. But Green River Reservoir is part of a hydroelectric project owned by Morrisville Water and Light, as was mentioned at the very beginning. The hydroelectric project consists of 3 dams, the Morrisville and Cadiz Falls dams, it's on the Lamoille River, and then the Green River Dam that's on the Green River and creates the Green River Reservoir. These facilities were built between 1890 and 1940. And in 1981, a license to operate the facility as a hydroelectric facility was issued by the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, that's often called FERC. And that license expired in 2015. And that expiration of that FERC license in 2015 kind of brought us to where we are today. Just really briefly, so FERC licenses are generally required for complicated large hydroelectric facilities like the Morrisville Water and Light facility. And whenever you need a FERC license for one of these hydroelectric facilities, a requirement in the Clean Water Act is triggered that you have to get what's called a water quality certificate. It's really a permit, and you have to get this certification or permit from the state regulatory agency that assures that you're meeting water quality standards and you're protecting fisheries habitat. And with the Morrisville license expiring in 2015, about 2010 approximately, Morrisville came in to start talking with the Agency of Natural Resources about relicensing the facility, getting that water quality certificate, and what would be required. That kind of kicked off the process that landed us, in this place that we are today. I think it's important to just put out there that the water quality review of hydroelectric projects is always difficult. And one of the main reasons is that these are generational licenses. You can see the Morrisville license went from 1981 to 2015. These licenses are in place for 30 or 40 years. Over that period of time, science evolved. We learned much, much more about what's necessary to protect water quality, to protect fisheries habitat. And when these 30, 40-year licenses come around, the updated science is applied to these existing older facilities, and it creates a tension between what's going to be asked of these facilities to retrofit and to make changes going forward if they're going to get the certification that goes along with the FERC license. The issues that come up at these facilities are very similar, and the issues at Morrisville facility was not really different than the other licenses that we see that come up in Vermont. You're looking at how much water is being taken out of the river system to generate power. Obviously, there needs to be a certain amount of water left in the river for water quality and fisheries habitat protection. And the reservoir issues are always the same. Many of the older facilities have these drawdowns that could be pretty large drawdowns in terms of how many feet a year, and that's not good for water quality. It creates erosion, it brings in invasive species. So there's always a move to stabilize the reservoirs and to restore river flow that balances, you're meeting water quality standards, protecting fish, and then the hydroelectric facility can take the water that is determined that can be taken to generate power. One thing that was unique about Morrisville as this project went through the licensing process was that I think when Morrisville came into the agency, before the license expired, and started to talk with the Agency of Natural Resources about what changes to the facility would have to be made to meet water quality standards and protect fisheries, that they saw, that the costs were higher than they thought. Morrisville balked at doing some of the studies, balked at being able to operate the facility in a way that the Agency of Natural Resources and other experts were saying was necessary to meet water quality standards. And part of the debate became, well, could the economics, the cost to Morrisville in making these changes be factored in? And maybe you couldn't meet water quality standards all the way because you account for the economics. So VNRC, like I said, we track all of these licenses because there aren't that many, and they are generational licenses. But this issue really was a very important issue, because it set a precedent that VNRC believed, and I believe the Agency of Natural Resources as well, that you really can't look at economics when you're going through this part of the licensing process. When you're looking at what is necessary to meet water quality standards and protect fisheries, it really is about that issue. You have to go through the process. You have to work with the regulators. You have to hear from experts from other parties, and a determination needs to be made about what's the minimum conditions, how much water can be taken to generate power and not violate, the ecological conditions that we all want to see as Vermonters. And, to make a long story a little shorter, after years of legal wrangling, the Vermont Supreme Court agreed with VNRC and the Agency of Natural Resources and Trout Unlimited, that was also a party to this, that you don't consider economics during this part of the FERC licensing process. And so as a result, there is now a water quality certificate for the facility, and it has conditions that VNRC and Trout Unlimited and ANR believes would meet water quality standards, but Morrisville is raising concerns that they will not, it's not economical for them to operate the facility under these conditions. And part of that discussion has now become, well, is Morrisville going to decommission the facility? They have filed some paperwork with FERC to decommission the facility. What does that mean? It's not really clear at this point, and I think that's a big part of what this discussion is kind of kicking off today. There is a process. You don't get just to stop running a facility and walk away from it, and you don't get to just remove a dam and a reservoir like the Green River Reservoir, which is an incredible statewide recreational resource, just goes away. You have to file with FERC. You have to address their application. You have to address dam safety issues. You have to address environmental issues. You have to engage the public. You have to work with the regulators, in this case, Agency of Natural Resources, Department of Fish and Wildlife, and Department of Forest, Parks and Recreation. And there'll be a public process surrounding this. And kind of that's where we are today. And so I guess I'll leave it there. I hope that kind of creates some context in terms of, why VNRC has been involved with this and kind of how we got to where we are today.
Thanks so much, John. Really appreciate that background. That's really useful. I just want to remind participants that you can put any questions you have as we're going along in the chat or the Q&A function at the bottom. We were already getting a couple of questions. And after we've gone through all the panelists once, we will open it up to questions and answers and pitch those to the various panelists. Next, I want to move to Anthony Arapino. Anthony is the special counsel to the Friends of Green River Reservoir. He's an environmental attorney. And Anthony, I'd love for you to kind of follow up on what John was talking about and talk about where the licensing process stands currently and what comes next in that process.
Yeah, thanks so much, Tom. And John gave me a perfect handoff there. Just for a little background, I have been fortunate to represent the board of the Friends of Green River Reservoir since 2017, when the initial court case in the Vermont Civil Division, Environmental Division was started by MWL, and I have been with the organization through all the legal twists and turns, and we have really looked at the developments and tried to weigh when and how and where to get involved in the process through the lens of the mission statement that Milford articulated at the very beginning. Now, the most recent and relevant developments with the relicensing application before FERC, as John mentioned, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, really have to do with this question of what does Morrisville do next? As John said, they've consistently taken the position that they can't economically and safely operate the Green River Dam hydro facility while also complying with the 2016 Clean Water Act water quality certificate that John described. Now, these claims have never actually been evaluated in court. The question that John was mentioning before is whether the economics could play a role. That is a threshold question, and that question was never answered. So the economic claims of MWL have never been ruled on by FERC or by a court. We don't actually know whether they could or could not economically operate the dam consistent with the conditions that are necessary to protect fisheries and water quality. That's the claim that they have made, and they have some analysis to back that up from the Vermont Public Power Supply Authority. But again, that is very much their claim. They've also claimed that they can't safely operate the dam, and for that reason, FERC has required MWL to complete a dam safety analysis, which is due to FERC this month. The due date on that study has been delayed many times, and I don't think FERC has any patience to delay that study any further. So we're looking to the completion of that study to shed further light on the question of safety. Now, as a brief aside, I want to mention that thanks to the efforts of your regional delegation at the State House, for those of you that are Lamoille County folks watching tonight, and with the support of the Scott administration, state tax dollars have been appropriated to help the state of Vermont undertake its own study of the dam's condition, including safety issues. And Secretary Moore, I'm sure, will have more to say about that. In the meantime, however, the results of the FERC required study have yet to be produced. So against this backdrop, as John alluded, MWL has recently signaled its intention to amend its FERC application for the Green River Dam. And instead of operating the dam as a hydroelectric facility, as it has historically done and initially planned to do, MWL has signaled the intention to decommission the Green River Dam. Now, while it sent that signal many months ago, it hasn't yet taken the formal steps to begin that process, some of the steps that John alluded to at the beginning. I want to pause and just say, for all of you that love the reservoir and that understand that it exists because of the dam, the word decommissioning can be pretty scary. But it's important to clarify here that decommissioning is not a one-size-fits-all approach. Rather, there's a spectrum of options available that range from totally removing the dam and restoring both upstream and downstream to its natural riverine condition. And then on the other side, there's keeping the dam completely in place, but removing the hydroelectric equipment and increasing the amount of water that's allowed to pass through the dam to support the fisheries downstream, as John alluded. A number of factors are going to influence the type of decommissioning approach that MWL might propose. These include cost, and full dam removal is often the most expensive route. I want to note that. Environmental impacts of removing the dam. In many cases, dam removal is an environmental net positive, but there are some cases where it's just not feasible or safe to release the decades of stored sediment behind the dam. There are flood control issues, and significantly, there are also the conservation of ecosystems and recreational resources that the dam's reservoir have created and have provided over the decades. So, as John alluded to, the dam's owner must thoroughly study the pros and cons of its proposed approach or approaches to decommissioning before FERC and any of the other numerous regulators will approve decommissioning. And John mentioned a number of the regulators that would be involved in that. To that list, I would add the US EPA and also the Vermont Public Utilities Commission, which oversees capital spending and rate setting by electric utilities like Morrisville Water and Light. So a key takeaway for the audience today is not only do you have a voice as a member of the public and in saying what, FERC might want to do eventually, but also there are all these agencies closer to home, these state agencies that are very sensitive to, and in many cases required to, gather public input about the right approach for the future. So I want to attune folks to that reality. Now, to date, MWL has shared very little publicly regarding which approach to decommissioning it would propose. And in fact, many of you might be aware that MWL has proposed to sell the dam to the state of Vermont for several $1 million to ensure the continued viability of the reservoir. I'm going to let Sally speak on behalf of the Friends of Green River Reservoir regarding, our feelings on that potential sale. And I expect Secretary Moore and Commissioner Snyder will probably have thoughts on that too. For now, I just want to briefly summarize that if MWL does choose to make the formal step of trying to amend its application to go in the direction of decommissioning, FERC regulations outline a two-step consultation process before it can even file that amendment. First, MWL must, quote, promptly notify each of the appropriate resource agencies and members of the public likely to be interested in the proceeding, provide them with a description of the proposed project and supporting information, and confer with them on project design, the impact of the proposed project, and what studies the applicant should conduct. And in this case, the proposed project, again, would be some form of decommissioning. During the second phase of the consultation, which again precedes any license application amendment, the applicant must conduct all reasonable studies and obtain all reasonable information requested by resource agencies and, within reason, interested members of the public. So the key takeaway there is we don't know what's going to happen, but it is not going to be a surprise. The process requires a lot of public study, a lot of public disclosure, and a lot of public conversation, lots of opportunities for folks who care about the reservoir to be involved. If MWL moves through the consultation process to a formal license amendment proposing decommissioning, there would be a new opportunity for interested parties to formally intervene at FERC to become involved in the FERC process. And that is something that the Friends of Green River Reservoir anticipates doing. And I suspect they would not be alone in that process. As participants in that process, I think you could count on the Friends to point to numerous precedents, including the recent Vermont Supreme Court decision involving MWL, to support the case that the Clean Water Act requires any decommissioning approach at Green River to account for and accommodate continued existing and designated uses of the reservoir as a fishery and a recreational resource for non-motorized boating and swimming. So I'm going to end there with the following message to all those who love the reservoir and are committed to it being there for future generations to enjoy. And that message is stay tuned and be ready to speak up.
Great. Thank you so much, Anthony. I really appreciate your perspective on that. Next, I'm going to pitch it to Secretary Moore. Secretary Moore, the Agency of Natural Resources has an interest in Green River Reservoir from so many different angles. In addition to running Green River Reservoir State Park, your various departments are also tasked with protecting water quality and ensuring healthy habitat for wildlife, both in and around the reservoir and the stream below the dam. So it's a tall order on all fronts. Can you talk about the important role that your agency plays in all of this and how you see ANR working on this issue?
Absolutely. Thank you, Tom. And thank you to those who've spoken previously. It really tees up this conversation well. As you've indicated, Vermont waters are central to the mission of the Agency of Natural Resources. So rivers, streams, lakes, and ponds are managed by the agency as a public trust resource. And what this means is that Vermonters, as opposed to private individuals or organizations or corporations, really own Vermont's waters. And as a trustee, ANR has an obligation to regulate and manage Vermont's waters in a way that benefits all Vermonters. And this management does evolve over time based on the best and most current information and science. And in addition to the requirements that sort of stem from this public trust doctrine, the Federal Clean Water Act does also require ANR to adopt and implement regulations, water quality standards that are intended to protect and improve water quality and aquatic habitat. And these regulations are reviewed regularly and approved by the Environmental Protection Agency and really form the basis for how the agency reviews and regulates activities that impact Vermont's waters. Most of the regulatory programs administered by ANR issue authorizations that run about 5 years in term. Although as John and Anthony both spoke to, hydroelectric facilities receive much longer term licenses, often extending up to 50 years that govern their operations. And because of the terms of these licenses that are issued by FERC, It really reflects a balance between the need for operational certainty for big, complex, expensive infrastructure projects that require stability against our evolving understanding of best practice to protect and improve water quality and habitat. And so, as John noted, during the hydroelectric license process, ANR is required to certify that the operation of a facility will comply with current water quality standards. And as these standards have evolved, the operation of facilities in Vermont's waterways must evolve to keep up with the increasing importance of maintaining a healthy environment. ANR values public resources, and we are exceedingly thoughtful about how those are managed, particularly when entities indicate they desire changes that could impact those resources. The Green River Reservoir is obviously a valued resource, as Heather described, and I know Commissioner Snyder will speak to a bit more in his remarks. So with the license for the Green River facility up for renewal, the agency has identified changes in how Morrisville Water and Light regulates water flow to preserve and protect both water quality and aquatic habitat. And as John noted, Morrisville has indicated that these operational changes required by ANR impact the economic viability of the operations of the hydroelectric facility and has suggested the state consider ownership. Operating a large facility, one that is as complex as the Green River Dam, is no small undertaking. Our dam safety team at ANR has indicated that were the state to take ownership, Green River would become the second largest dam in our portfolio of about 80 dams statewide, behind only the Waterbury Reservoir Dam. But unlike in Waterbury, Green River does not have the partnership of the federal government through the Army Corps of Engineers to support the ongoing repair and maintenance of the facility. We're also in the position where there isn't a comprehensive study on the current condition of the Green River Dam, and we really need that to inform a full understanding of existing maintenance needs, along with the ongoing cost to operate the facility and any future rehabilitation requirements. And so, as was mentioned earlier this year, the state did commit $350,000 for such an evaluation as part of what we call the Budget Adjustment Act. ANR has been working over the last several months with Morrisville Water and Light to share information and ensure that these monies are used in a way that is additive and not redundant with reports that Morrisville has already filed with FERC. It's also important to keep in mind, as John, I think, indicated, that Morrisville has its own independent obligations to FERC. And while our study may be helpful to what Morrisville needs to produce, that's not driving the study design. We expect that the study will take about 18 months, meaning it should be completed in late 2023. And we look forward to having this additional information to support a data-informed conversation about both the infrastructure and the incredible resource that is the reservoir. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Secretary Moore. Next, I want to pass it over to Commissioner Snyder. Commissioner Snyder, your department is one of the 3 departments that are housed within the Agency of Natural Resources. And it's probably the one that people most tangibly interact with when they visit Green River Reservoir, because the land surrounding the reservoir is owned and managed as a state park. Can you talk about what role you see your department playing in helping to protect and manage the reservoir and the surrounding conserved lands?
Yes, thanks, Tom, and thanks all, and good evening all. As Commissioner of Forest Parks and Recreation, I serve as the owner on behalf of all Vermonters of this land and the surrounding resources, with an outstanding staff and many great partners, some represented here tonight. Again, on behalf of all Vermonters, what's our role in managing and protecting? That's it. Our role is in managing and protecting basically all of the above for Vermonters and our guests, and doing so in that legal and regulatory framework that you've been hearing about. So it's really quite simple. And because of all of that, it's also really complex. But what we can agree on is it's a fabulous place. It's often referred to as a gem. And it's quite popular. Since 2001, there's a 200% increase in visitation. We had last year, we had 12,000 campers, and that's 27% more than the year before that. And so it continues apace, and we all know the reasons for that. And And so our job is to keep that happening. And we do so, frankly, all by, it's simple again, in that it's all according to that conservation easement that Heather referred to. And that's the guide that we implement in trying to balance appropriate recreational use, which is the purposes and the allowed uses and the restricted uses are very clear in that legal instrument. And it really is a helpful guide for how we approach management and protection and management of this place, given a clear statement for its undeveloped character as being fundamental. And that guides everything. And so we have strategies that we implement, limiting parking, limiting sites, limiting group sites. We even have a Twitter account to help people understand, the parking and capacity issues. We take really great pride in making access possible, but in a very low impact way, managing it again with many partners throughout the agency and beyond. So, perhaps I can save us a little time here and kind of really leave it at that. That's it. It's implementing the protection and management of this place on behalf of Vermonters for all kinds, for great purpose, and I'd say with great success. And that's why we're all here in large part. I will add, I guess, in closing, because I have to, right? We focus on the reservoir and the aquatic resource for all of its glory, but there's so much that surrounds it, and indeed other water bodies, also thousands of acres of forest land with unique habitats. A vast trail is protected, a portion of the vast trail, a portion of the Catamount Trail is protected by this park. So, there's just an awful lot going on here, and most of it's really good.
Great. Thank you so much, Mr. Snyder. And last, I want to bring us to Sally Laughlin. So Sally is the president of Friends of Green River Reservoir. Sally, the Friends is made up of people like much of our audience tonight, members of the public who love Green River Reservoir, love paddling there, camping there, fishing, bird watching, and they want to ensure that the park is protected. Can you talk about what step the Friends have taken recently to help protect the park and how you think membership can get involved in protecting it too?
Yes, it's a privilege to speak for the Friends of Green River and to be the president of such a fine group. And what a great group of people we have together here tonight. It's been wonderful to hear all of you speak. I just feel that, you all together, this is quite a remarkable gathering. Thank you, Tom, for putting it together. Well, of our 400 some more members of the Friends of Green River, everyone shares a deep commitment about how much we care about this unique and lovely place and how much we want it preserved. And we're certainly all very grateful for the fine management that Forests and Parks has done since taking the reservoir over, and how well it's protected and how well it's managed. And the very idea of Friends of Green River mudflats is absolutely revolting and alarming. Our members have been asking to have a webinar asking for more information on what is happening exactly. And as all of you have done, you've done it very well and very succinctly, but there's an awful lot happening and a lot of different moving parts. And Morrisville Water and Light, of course, is a pretty small municipal utility. It's been sort of knocked off center dealing with this recertification. But they've done some good things too. I was director of the Vermont Institute of Natural Science in the 1970s, and we did the first loon survey in the state because we thought they were getting to be rare. And in fact, it turned out that they were so rare they needed to be declared endangered. But Morrisville Water and Light, at first request and before the species was declared endangered, did start managing the water level for the loons. But in this instance, they just, I think all they can see is that they might lose money and not the entire picture. But the Friends of Green River is not at all interested in blaming or assigning blame. We are only interested in protecting this unique and wonderful place, however it can be done, whatever our path forward is. In terms of what we've been doing through all of this complex maze of appeals in courts and so forth, primarily, and I was looking at my notes, since April 2015, we began trying to collect information and post it for our members in our newsletters, on our website, Website reports go back to 2016. And periodic letters to our members, now emails to our members. We've been attempting to stay on top of what's happening, to keep our members informed, and to position ourselves as a voice of reason and support of the reservoir. And certainly totally agree with what John said earlier. Environmental regulations don't bend to economic concerns. We have some very excellent water quality regulations in place that were not laws 30 or 40 years ago, and they had their last recertification. And another thing that we've done has been fortunate enough to have Anthony as our legal representative, because we couldn't follow what was happening in the courts without having a lawyer to file for party status. We couldn't just do that as a group of volunteer members. This past year, members of our board have been in touch with our congressional delegation, with our state representatives, our state senators, and local representatives who've been wonderful about providing great support for that $350,000 study, which Julie mentioned earlier. Our dam committee, sometimes referred to as the dam committee, has been very active in writing reports, figuring out what's going on, posting them on. And we've met many times with Morrisville Water Light, but I don't think anything has changed in those 7 years. And when the first time we met with them, actually 2015, they said that they couldn't keep running the dam and they were going to decommission it if they had to follow these environmental regulations. That seems to be pretty much what they're still saying. At one point, Friends of Green River even offered to provide some funds toward an economic assessment for them, but nothing came of that. But however you look at it, and you know what all of you said, but however you look at it, Green River Reservoir is the crown jewel of Vermont State's Park. In fact, it's the crown jewel of Vermont, and it's a treasure to protect and preserve. Friends of Green River is dedicated to seeing that happens and to working with all of you to figure out what the best way forward is. So thank you, Tom, so much for putting this together, and to all of our panelists who've been here tonight.
Great. Thank you so much, Sally. And so now I think I'm going to change my view a little bit so that we can see everybody here. And just going to open it up for questions from the public. So if you haven't already had a chance to, please pop a question in to the Q&A function. I'm going to bounce around a little bit based on where the conversation takes us. But first I want to start with one asking, is it feasible to buy the dam and shut down the hydroelectric plant? Is there precedent for this, and what would it cost? I think maybe Secretary Moore, maybe we'd start with you on that one.
Happy to. I guess I'm not sure, at least in my tenure. I don't know that there's precedent for that. Certainly the state owns a number of dam facilities. To the best of my knowledge, we don't actually operate any of the hydropower resources, but there are other dams that are owned by the state where there is a hydropower resource associated with it. Wrightsville and Waterbury probably being the two most well-known, where there's essentially I guess I wouldn't describe it as a partnership, but a contract between a state and a utility to generate electricity from that facility. So it's not unprecedented, but this is really a significant facility, and one that I think we would need to consider carefully. The agency is actually in the middle of a process looking at all of the 80 dams that are sort of within our portfolio right now. Many of them maintain or support important recreational assets at other state parks, as well as important fishing areas within the state. And we know that the maintenance needs of those facilities are significant. And so the report that will get underway, hopefully here in short order, we anticipate will generate a little bit more depth of information than perhaps we're collecting on some of these other facilities, but allow us to really start to wrap our arms around the state's dam portfolio and the ongoing operation and maintenance costs associated with it.
Great. And would anyone else like to weigh in on that one? Okay. Another great question here, and I think this one, Secretary Moore, if you wouldn't mind staying on, this next one will probably be under your umbrella too. If the 18-month resolution timeline that Secretary Moore projected is true, will Morrisville Water and Light be permitted to continue to operate in the interim under conditions that have been established to be suboptimal for reservoir aquatic life? So I think what they're saying is Morrisville Water and Light currently operating the dam under the new conditions that have been imposed according to new regulations, or in the old conditions that are more economically beneficial to them?
Yeah, Morrisville is continuing to operate under their previous license as they work through the process with FERC. And I think it's important to remember that these are really two separate activities. The relicensing process with FERC is on one track. The study that state is engaged in is really answering some of these questions about sort of the true condition of the asset, and also forecasting future maintenance needs so that we could have a robust financial package to consider and debate as part of future discussions. But that doesn't really, while there's some overlap in the information that's being collected in support of both of those initiatives, they aren't at all hinged together. And in fact, Morrisville is, as I think Anthony indicated in his remarks, has some deadlines approaching where they have reports they need to produce for FERC that may provide information to help further inform the studies we'll engage in. But again, those are really on distinct tracks from one another.
Great, thank you very much. Next, I'd like to pitch a question to Heather Furman. Somebody asked Heather if the conservation easement addresses the proposed draining of the reservoir. Is that something the Nature Conservancy has any control over as the easement holder on the state park itself?
So it's a great question. When the easement was contemplated, it was only applying to the land surrounding the reservoir. So as I understand it, the easement protects, a little over 2,200 acres of land and 19 miles of shoreline. And the land under the reservoir is actually still owned by Morrisville Water and Light. So, in the unlikely event that there was a decommissioning and the reservoir was drained, we'd have to have a discussion about what that land would look like for the community going forward. My hope would be that you'd get the Nature Conservancy involved and we would put a conservation easement on it and continue to protect it. I know that this is a very sensitive topic, and we all love the reservoir for what it is and what it provides to communities and to as a recreation resource. It's so important. But from nature's perspective, we take a really long view on ecological processes, and what has been created, kind of the ecological processes and the habitat conditions that have been created over the last 75 years with this dam in place are a wonderful resource. And if something changed in the future, nature would come back and it would be a different set of habitats and a different resource. It could be a series of wetlands. It would attract different species. So just to say that there is a future where the conservation easement could continue to protect the ecological integrity of that place, regardless of what humans choose to do with regard to the dam.
Right. Thank you very much for that. The next couple of questions are kind of on their same theme, and I'd love to pitch them to John and Anthony. So one person is saying the relicensing of Green River Dam has been going on for more than 10 years, and Morrisville still hasn't decided what it wants to do with the dam, despite having told FERC a decade ago that it intended to relicense it. Is Morrisville just dragging their feet here in order to avoid meeting water quality standards? And then another person asked a similar, it's similar enough. I'll just leave it with that one. John, you want to go ahead first?
Yeah, I mean, I guess all I would say is, as somebody who has worked on this issue since before the process started, because I was with A&R in 2010, 2011, when Morrisville actually came to the agency. It's very frustrating now that we finally have a decision that's basically saying that the agency scientists are correct, the fisheries biologists and the water quality scientists, and we know what's needed to meet water quality standards. It's frustrating that we're not doing that right now. So right now, the water quality certificate is not being implemented. The facilities are in limbo as we continue to wait to see what Morrisville files with FERC with regard to decommissioning. And FERC is still procedurally contesting some aspects of the initial license. So I'm frustrated, and I think anglers are frustrated. There was another question about, what are the conditions like now under the old standards, I guess, from the 1980s? Is it really that bad, is kind of how I interpreted it. And my answer is, yeah, it's not good because water quality standards aren't being met. The condition for fisheries habitat, minimum conditions are not being met because of the lack of water that are in those river systems right now, and the reservoir drawdown that occurs, which is not allowed to occur. At other facilities that have gone through this process, they have stabilized the reservoir. They have greatly increased the flows in the rivers, and these facilities have not. So we need to get to that condition as soon as possible, from my perspective.
Thank you, John. Anthony, anything to add?
Yeah, I would just add, I would just observe, without imputing any motive, but certainly the MWL has pulled every legal lever within its reach. And there is actually another whole other case that we didn't even talk about that MWL has filed against FERC, the relicensing agency, in the Court of Appeals. So they've definitely benefited from the drawn out litigation process that has forestalled FERC actually moving forward with the license. But I think FERC's patience is running out. And the safety study is an important milestone. We have seen in the United States other dams fail for safety reasons. So FERC, even though nobody has proven that Morrisville Water Light's concerns about the water quality conditions are validated, I think FERC is proceeding cautiously because they don't want to blow past those concerns and then have something unfortunate happen. And Morrisville just incidentally has continued to benefit by operating under the old conditions while this issue hangs out there unresolved. But I think there's a growing impatience. I know VNRC and some other organizations had asked the Agency of Natural Resources to go ahead and directly enforce the license conditions. The agency has declined to do so until FERC acts. But I think we're coming to the point now where FERC has really run out of patience with unfounded arguments about safety, wants to get to the bottom of those and get on with the process. It is very unusual. If your license expires to drive, you don't get 6 years plus to go to the DMV and say, well, hold on a sec, I'm not sure I need those glasses to drive safely at night. And so that's what's been happening here. And they're regulatory agencies can move slowly and have to be careful in what they do, but there is a limit to that. And I think we're approaching the limit.
Yeah. Great. Well, thank you, Anthony. Next, I'd like to pitch a question to Commissioner Snyder. So a couple of questions that are related. This first one, somebody's asking, they said, prior to state taking control of Green River Res, my wife and I were frequent visitors. We loved the easy access circa 2002, and especially the low levels of people there. They talk about their dogs swimming and kayaking. And they said after the state took over, the crowding increased dramatically, that we were basically shut out of one of our favorite pastimes. Are the record visits coming mostly from out-of-staters? And then, I'll pitch the second question to you in a minute. Go ahead, though.
Okay. I think I understand this. First, at Green River, those 12,000 or so campers last year, 80% are Vermonters in-state, and the day use, which averages 5,000, 5,500 a year pretty steadily. That's the counted day use. That's traditionally very heavy to in-state as well. So that's that piece. Otherwise, more broadly, sure. It happened to me when I was a younger guy, a much loved local haunt in the woods on a lake. got turned into more of a public thing because, you know, yeah, balancing it with everybody's desire to be there and taking care of it. So it's challenging. I recognize that. I experienced it myself. I know this. We've seen it at Zach Woods as well, where a similar phenomenon. It's happened at Waterbury Reservoir remote sites. And what we found is, you know, we have this responsibility, and this is our best take on implementing that for these stated purposes and goals, and balancing, you know, pretty carefully and limiting. Yeah, it's very limited recreational use that's allowed, and it concentrates in some ways. And I guess that's what folks experience when they can't get in because it's so limited. But it's a matter of balancing with so many and everybody's great desire to be there. It's not complicated in that way. I mean, I feel for folks who feel this way, but I also hear from so many who would talk of the degradation and the unpleasant experiences when it was, you know, not sort of left, you know, sort of when it was busy. There were many times where it was overused. So it's a response to that, and I think it's reasonable, and most on balance find it to be really working for most.
Yeah,
I hope so.
I think we all have horror stories of prior to the state owning Green River Reservoir, or to the new outhouses that they installed at Waterbury Reservoir, stepping off into the woods and finding things that one does not wish to find when stepping off into the woods. So I think there are clearly some very strong benefits to all of the things that come with the ownership as a state park.
There's usually evidence. If we're installing such features, there's evidence that we need them.
Yes, exactly. And then somebody else asked a question, how all of these potential outcomes related to Green River Reservoir might relate to or impact some of the surrounding ponds like Zach Woods, perch, or mud ponds.
Well, it's a great question. As I said earlier, let's remember this is it's a 5,000 plus acre state park. The easement, I think, as Heather stated, is the reservoir and a portion of the larger state park, but the state ownership, the easement, and then the state ownership beyond encompasses these places. And other than in as much as they're ecologically, functionally connected to what's going on there, and as Heather said, there'll be a response, and ecologically, should things change, I think they are part of our management, and we hope to continue to do what we're doing the way we do it. And should that change, it's still public land, under most of it under conservation easement and protection, and we'll sort it out then.
Great, thank you. So this is one that I want to just open up to anybody who'd like to jump in. With the looming global warming disaster, it seems that it is important to keep green energy sources operating as long as they do more good than harm. Is it reasonable to assume that hydropower will become more valuable in the future? And wouldn't this help with Morrisville Water and Light's economic concerns? So is there anyone, Secretary Moore, you've come off mute. Do you want to take a stab at that?
Yeah, I'm happy to get the ball rolling on this one. And I, you know, the agency really reviews a lot of different renewable energy projects and tries to review them under the principle of we're looking for environmentally beneficial, well-sited renewable generation. And it's a balancing act, and appreciate and certainly share the concerns around climate change and global warming and the importance of local renewable energy sources. But at the same time, it can't be an all or nothing proposition that comes at the expense of other really important natural resources considerations that we're charged with. And so it's trying to find that balance point. And we believe that this run of river operation, as envisioned for the Green River facility, and as we've been working towards with other hydroelectric facilities, achieves that balance of providing a smaller yet important amount of renewable hydroelectric energy, and at the same time being protective of our water resources.
Go ahead, Heather.
Okay, I'll just chime in on that. I agree with everything that Secretary Moore just said, and I want to just underscore that there can be, really significant ecological and biodiversity impacts as a result of dams, and frankly, of any energy source, right? Even renewable energy source, we know that there's going to be impacts. We have thousands of dams in Vermont. Many are no longer serving a useful purpose. I know the Nature Conservancy and VNRC and many of our partners are active in helping communities remove dams and restore those systems for better water quality and flood resilience. So there are, Eric, I appreciate the question. There are real environmental benefits to removing dams, and in many cases, we should be doing that. In other cases, there are dams that are still generating electricity. We have opportunities through FERC relicenses to improve or optimize the way those dams are managed. And the Nature Conservancy has been involved in many of these larger dam projects on the Connecticut River. We've been doing that for over a decade. But at the end of the day, I think we just need to, there are always going to be trade-offs. We need to be eyes wide open about our energy sources, how they're sited, what the impacts are, not just on the ecological and environmental surrounds, but on the people that are being impacted by siting of our energy. And we have a tremendous appetite for energy, and so it's going to take everyone thinking about how we reduce our demand and also site our energy sources in the right way.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in on this too, because in other parts of my legal practice, I do have the privilege of representing some really great renewable energy developers in the state of Vermont. And I just want people to understand that the Agency of Natural Resources is pretty consistent across renewable energy. It follows the science for the most part, and holds developers to a pretty high standard. And so Morrisville Water and Light is definitely not being singled out here. I want to flip the question too, though, and say that, Morrisville Water and Light should be thinking about the future. I think some of its economic assumptions might be based on a present day economic reality where we're not valuing the locally produced hydroelectric power, renewable power as much as we should be. And that has to do with national policy as much as anything we control here in the state. FERC sets some of that policy and the rates for fossil fuels versus renewable energies. But I think if we're smart as a society, we'll be moving to a place where, if Morrisville Water and Light makes the investment to continue this as a renewable energy resource in balance with our clean water standards, that the return on that investment in the future, it really ought to be higher than current day assumptions. So hopefully that's where we'll be heading. And I hope that is factored into Morrisville Water and Light's plans.
Thank you, Anthony. Question about dam safety. For those of us who live below the dam, will it hold up safely if we get another storm like Irene? Secretary Moore, I think this would be a good one for you to start on.
Yeah, so happy to share what I know, which may not be enough to be truly satisfactory to the person who asked the question. But certainly this is an aging piece of infrastructure, and it's a complicated piece of infrastructure. And we are very interested in the engineering evaluation that's about to get underway with the $350,000 in this year's state budget. Our dam safety engineers have visited the site, made some observations. My sense from the conversations I've had with them is I don't believe that they're concerned about a catastrophic failure at this point in time, but there are some known deficiencies with the dam, and things that were the state to take a long-term ownership interest in it would need to be addressed. And so the work we're doing is really trying to better understand the current condition. But I don't believe that unlike there are several other facilities in the state where they've identified incredibly pressing concerns, and we've directed resources to help with the stabilization or renovation of those facilities. This isn't an area where we felt the need to engage on an emergency basis. And so I don't think that kind of catastrophic failure is something that's currently a concern to the agency.
Great, thank you very much. So somebody asked about the Army Corps helping out with the Waterbury Dam. Can you explain what the difference is and why that's not feasible necessarily for the Army Corps to be a partner on Green River Dam as well?
Yes. So we actually inquired with the Army Corps if this was a place that they might partner with us, and they declined our invitation. But the 3 facilities where we have that significant Army Corps partnership were all built immediately following the 1927 flood, and that's the East Barry Dam, the Wrightsville Dam, and the Waterbury Reservoir Dam. And it is their significant flood control functions that engage the Army Corps and continue to engage the Army Corps. We are actively working right now on what will ultimately be a fairly significant rehabilitation and renovation project at the Waterbury Reservoir Dam. And it's a strong partnership with the Army Corps, but they also have many, many commitments, and probably every state in the country, and weren't interested in discussing with us taking on additional obligations at this time.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Snyder, I think this one might be for you. I know that this department does a lot of assessments of the impacts of various options in situations like this, and the ANR will be undergoing the assessment that Secretary Moore talked about for the next 18 months. Somebody asked if there's been an economic impact assessment on the result of losing Green River Reservoir, or in other words, to turn that around the other way. Has there been any sort of economic impact assessment of Green River Reservoir State Park itself? Or from the larger perspective, I'm sure you've done them on the state park systems in general, but is there anything specific to Green River Reservoir that you know of that you could kind of speak to in terms of the economic impact of it? And just to finish, this person said they retired to Vermont because of the reservoir, and the quality of contribution to life here is enormous.
We don't have it specific. You have it right. It's like we have it kind of generally, somewhat tangentially in cases, even anecdotally, lots of different metrics. Some $100 million of related indirect spending to Vermont State Parks visitation throughout the year, throughout the system. 55 developed operated parks. So, but as you say, not specific, as you guessed, not specific to Green River that I'm aware of. I'd love to be proven wrong by any of our crackerjack staff here who know better, perhaps. But it's significant. We know it. It's it's beyond economic. We have this. I think we take our host community relations very seriously. I know we do, and they're really important. And there's so many benefits. There's social and cultural and environmental benefits, we think, obviously, but sure, it's significant economic impact in spending and related spending, and then also through jobs, wages, labor. We put a lot of people to work in building those, ADA accessible boat launches and associated infrastructure. So there's economic activity associated with it in a bunch of different ways. And I better stop talking about it, or I'll start making up more numbers. Numbers.
No, that's great. That's a good overview of kind of all the different ways that a state park like Green River can really impact.
Oh, I'm just getting started, Tom. There's so many more.
Oh, yeah. Well, great. Well, thank you. So does ANR believe that Morrisville Water and Light will file the required FERC dam safety by the May 22 date, which, they have 21 days left? If Morrisville Water and Light does not meet that requirement, what do they project their response may be?
I don't know. We don't have any insight into where Morrisville Water and Light is in the preparation of that study. I think early on, as the legislature was discussing the potential funding for this engineering evaluation, they had held out some hope that it might be sufficient to complete or to fund the entirety of the study. And I no longer believe that that's the case, given the level of funding available and sort of the fairly significant set of questions that our dam safety program has identified as need of answer. But I don't have any information beyond that on where they may stand with their efforts to prepare that report. And in terms of next steps, should they miss the deadline, that again is going to be a conversation between Morrisville Water and Light and FERC.
Yeah. Okay, so in other words, A&R would not necessarily need to be required by statute to respond to that right away. That's really an issue for FERC licensing.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. So this was an interesting question and not something that I'd thought about, but following up, I think it's following up on what Heather was talking about the state of Vermont owning the land surrounding the reservoir, but not the land underneath. If the state was to end up purchasing the dam itself, would the purchase of the land underneath all of the reservoir have to come with that? And if so, is there any idea to project, what that might entail and what that might cost? Is there any precedent for that in taking over a dam, you also had to take over the land? Not sure if that's kind of a question maybe for Secretary Moore, but if anybody else knows if there have been similar deals in the past where they've had to purchase all the land with it.
Yeah, I don't know, Tom. I'm not aware of any precedent. Yeah. Maybe John would know because he has history with the agency too, but.
Right.
Yeah, no, now I'm not off the top of my head. I am not aware.
And I would be very curious, Heather, in all of our many land dealings with the Nature Conservancy in the past, how anyone has ever placed a valuation on flooded underwater land.
I wouldn't want to be the appraiser trying to figure that out because I don't think there's many comparable sales to compare to. Certainly that would be the process, whatever is being offered for sale. If it's the reservoir included with the dam and the water, the water is obviously owned by the state. I would think, and I'm just speculating, that if Morrisville Water and Light owns the dam and the water is owned by the state, that the land supports that would be part of the sale of the dam. But that's just speculation, and I would leave it to the experts who appraise these kinds of things to figure out how to value that.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you. So I'll ask one last question, and then I will let you all go on with your evenings. This person is wondering if Morrisville Water and Light has provided any projected power costs increase if the dam is decommissioned. In other words, currently Morrisville Water and Light ratepayers are paying a certain rate based on the energy that's generated by the dam. If they were to remove the dam, what would that do to rates? And I guess that's really a question for Morrisville Water and Light, but Anthony or Sally or anyone, I don't know if anyone has seen a report talked about what their projections are for what would happen if the dam was no longer generating any electricity.
We tried to get some of those figures through the years with no luck whatsoever. But I know that it's been speculated by members of our board who have been involved in utilities that there might possibly be a way to run the dam in a way that would produce more energy and with more modern equipment.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you. And
yeah, I don't really know that they've done the projection, but it does call up the question. This is, again, as I mentioned before, the Public Utilities Commission, which is involved in setting rates and approving long-term planning by regulated utilities like MWL. That's certainly something that would be involved for any proposal to decommission the dam. And I just want to leave it with that understanding for folks. If anyone thinks that going the decommissioning route is going to be inexpensive for the ratepayers of Morrisville Water and Light to end up with a decommissioned dam that has one less power producing asset that's available to them, they would be mistaken. The process of decommissioning, all the studies, all the public process and licensing, and then paying for the actual work, again, whether that's taking the dam partially apart, taking it completely apart, just taking out the hydroelectric equipment. There's a lot of costs ahead. And so I hope for the future that Morrisville Water and Light is being really thoughtful about those, and that everybody that's involved and that cares, and all the regulators are taking a look at those questions in a cost benefit analysis of what truly makes the most sense for the future here. And I don't think anyone has a good answer to that question right now.
Great. Thank you, Anthony. And with that, I just want to put it out to the group one more time to open it up and say, is there anything that you feel like we've missed tonight, or anything that wasn't asked, any important pieces of information that you want to share before we call it a night? Go ahead, Mike.
Thanks, Tom. I meant to, and I regret not earlier. I just wanted a general thanks to all who pulled us together, but especially to the Friends of Green River Reservoir for helping, and also for being, well, good friends. And for a long period of time, it's, as I mentioned, these partnerships and relationships, particularly with locals and lovers of our parks, it's really part of the secret sauce. So wanted to get that in. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner.
Here, here.
All right. Well, with that, thank you all so much. I know that this group of people is your time is just so incredibly valuable, and you're pulled in so many different directions. And so we just can't thank you all enough for committing the time to this discussion. We had around 150 people joining us tonight, and that's just individual sign-ins. So who knows how many we're watching. And this will go on TV later on Green Mountain, the Green Mountain channel, public access channel. So if anybody missed it, that's another place to catch it. But thank you all very much for coming tonight. We really appreciate it. Have a good night, guys.
Thanks, Tom.
Thanks to everyone. Thank you, Tom.